Welcome to the data dark ages, where humanity seems to be losing a battle of good versus evil.
Have we become defenseless by sharing our data with evildoers like the Russians, Steve Bannon, Facebook, and Cambridge Analytica?
Or will white knights like Apple, Mike Bloomberg, and Doug Rushkoff save us all from ourselves? Welcome to our Future of Consumer Data edition of Future Forward. I'm Gene DeRose.
And I'm Steve Rosenbaum, and let us launch. I got to dive right in here because I'm not so sure. I mean, you got to say the line, so maybe you feel it, but I'm not sure that I would put the white hat on Apple.
No, and I think, you and I switch this out sometimes, and I did a little bit of the treatment for this one, and I intentionally meant to set that up, but in a kind of a bogus manner, because as we get into this, I'm going to, believe me, that was a question mark, not a statement. And I think neither is Facebook evil, nor is Apple a saint.
Yeah, there's a lot of evil to go around. All right, but let us start. We've got a bunch of chapters here, but we're going to start with this Facebook shutting down its research app. That's a fascinating story.
Yeah. I mean, the good way to look at it, I guess, is that in particular, even though a lot was going on, a handful of apps were shut down. The ground zero of this was 13 and above year old kids were willing to share all of their data. And this went on for quite a while. And these were actually apps that were in the App Store that required special access. And, as happens in political things like this, no sooner does it get announced and starts making a big buzz than, they pull it out and get in trouble.
Just straight up for $20 a month, would you do it?
I'm not against that. And, one of the things that I believe is true here is it's not necessarily Facebook's problem. This is that COPA law that said for above age 13, some of these things are allowed to have happened. And, I would say for kids, if their parents approved, then whatever.
So Apple came in and essentially slapped their hand, and Google's as well, and said, you've crossed our terms of service. Get off our device, right? And the media played it like it was Apple, slapping the hands of the big bad data eating media giant. But
right.
I don't know.
It's fraught. It is fraught, and it's not fair that Apple, who fails again and again at social media and would like to have those kind of problems at a certain level, has the distance of their device, right? And there are places where we're going to get into in a few minutes, because I have a soapbox to climb on, where they do some pretty bad things too. So I think that it's posturing by them. I think maybe they have to up to a certain point, but I wouldn't take it as meaning Apple is saving the world here.
So I thought net that the outcome for me was, you know what, Apple, it's not your data, it's mine. And if I want to prostitute myself for $20 a month so that people can paw around. Now, the question, of course, is what's Facebook going to do with it? Are they going to resell it? Are they going to use it to cross market? Or are they just using it for research, right?
Yeah, I mean, research with quotes around it. And I'll say this, because I could be wrong, but I bet 99.5% that this is the kind of data that is not about being flipped around in direct marketing, those consumers or people, but maybe people like them, because it's just about discovering trends and patterns and what that they can learn from these people in order to do a better job. And in particular, these are people that are not spending time doing stories on Facebook. They're over on, ironically, Instagram. So, that's pretty much it.
Now, as the reporting went on, Recode had a good piece on it.
Yes.
And their take was that it was actually very similar to a previous app that had been shut down that Facebook was using to determine what apps kids were using that were becoming popular, so they could either buy them or compete with them or reverse engineer them. I hadn't heard that.
No, I didn't really know about that one either, but it also doesn't surprise me, because these guys have to get their data from somewhere. But I also think that it smacks a tiny little bit of some of the older and less dangerous stories from Facebook. This is not like stealing credit card information. It's not like the Cambridge Analytica problem. It's at least a level down from that, and it's the kind of thing people do all over the place. If you want to have a free internet with media and social media being something that you don't have to pay for, the cost of that is advertising, and advertising doesn't work unless people know about who these people are.
All right. So net, we think they're all guilty. We don't give anybody a pass, but we think Apple's probably not heroic.
That's right. And I think it just points up the broader theme of this show, which is that, this is the cost we pay for being willing to give up our data. And, surveys over and over again say if it means free stuff, if it keeps stuff out of our way, we don't care. And then people get a little upset. Now, of course, that doesn't mean these bad actors are not bad actors. So we're going to get into some even scarier things in a few minutes.
All right, so let's zip over to the Open Democracy article, because that I had not seen. You dug that up, and that was like super duper ultra chilling.
Yeah, and in a nutshell, because it's I vetted it as best I could, and there is some of it, it's been quoted a little, but it isn't anything that we doubt, except that the bald-faced statement of we were planning on stealing the election, coming from certain people. So it really ties Bannon and his crew in with Cambridge Analytica, and it does not, it kind of points up to the Russians and a few other things that are going on.
And it goes way back, right? I mean,
it goes way back. We're talking 3 or 4 years ago, and because of Bannon's involvement in some of this stuff, and there's a coda to this whole thing because his star is fading more and more every day. There's a new doc that details it, but his connection and alliance with Breitbart News and the way in which they have used data in kind of chilling ways is also the backdrop, though not core to this particular story.
So the thing about Cambridge Analytica, just a slight sidebar here, but not really. I find myself thinking, why is it you can set this company up, you can take money from the Mercers, you can screw with the election, and then really all you need to do to kind of avoid criticism is just shut it down. Like, okay, we're out of business. Now, the people don't go, there's no prosecution, there's no investigation. It just kind of, it literally vanishes into the ether. And that the kind of dark-hearted strategy piece of it will just show up somewhere else. It'll be called, ABC Corp or, New Corp or whatever,
Yeah, this is on the egregious side of things. It reminds me of some of the credit cards that millions go through Equifax or Target or a few other instances. And there was another story like this just this week where millions of personal information by dark web people but that almost feels like old news to us. But these are the ones that are crimes, undoubtedly, and the Cambridge Analytica one especially, burns. And it's not unlike the Facebook company that they had hired to do competitive research, although it's worse.
So I was doing some research for a article I'm writing. Meanwhile, I looked at over the last 3 years at Facebook's profits, and they're jaw-dropping.
And the recent quarter was new records on everything.
So Facebook in 2018, all in, not revenues, profits, net revenues, $22 billion.
It's incredible. It's incredible.
And it goes up in a straight line, really. So I guess, this is a lot of what I'm stewing on about Facebook these days is like, both the Associated Press and Snopes both stepped away from the Facebook fact-checking partnerships that they were in, and Snopes kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge at the end of their polite "we're stepping away" mentioned that they were getting paid $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why wasn't that $1 million a year?
Why wasn't it $1 million a year? Why isn't it a bigger story? You know, we've teased up this idea of they should have a kind of ombudsman on things like that, and it's become a bit of a more of a story that more people have been aware of in the last week or two. That Facebook is paying third parties to try to fact check and keep things in line. But boy, it's not good. And before we veer too far from that other story, there's a secondary story that we're linking to as well that confirms a lot of what we already knew, which is that Manafort in his time there was explicitly giving Russians polling data. You know, it's really it's amazing. You know, I know there is no collusion, as the orange-headed one says, but boy, it's amazing how a web of what seems like collusion involving so many players, except maybe Trump himself, is out there.
Yeah, this is the article in allpoliticsallthetime.com,
Right.
which lays out an incredibly detailed TikTok of events with very careful backup and corroboration that is just jaw-dropping. Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
and you know, in setting this episode up, between the Apple story, a few other things, and the fact that that attached to this Russian and politics story, and a couple of those are a few weeks old. But what's new is that the American intel chiefs, or in particular one of the main ones, basically said the Russians are readying for 2020 election cycle info wars. You know, it's going to happen again. The signs are there. The conditions are even riper, et cetera, et cetera. So
right, to which Trump said they should go back to school because they're naive.
Right, exactly. And then a day and a half later started to kind of circle back or back up a little, or who knows what, because my theory on Trump is he's a coward when it comes to talking to people in real time, but then he'll say anything behind the cover of tweets. But look, this is the one that we set up, and we kind of did good and evil and didn't divide it into the stories. But in the wake of all this, the news this week is that Mike Bloomberg has set up an amazing operation that actually, even though it looks like it's great for him running for office, is largely expected to simply be his defeat Trump agenda. But this is all about how he's using consumer data, big data, and the power of data to do better.
Yeah, so I have to say I don't understand Mayor Mike's thing about he's waiting to see what Biden's doing. I don't understand it. Like to me, it reminds me back in the olden days of the Mario Cuomo dragging his feet about running for. It's like, look, either you're running or you're not. Like,
Hamlet by the Hudson. I knew him well. I think that you have to take the ego of these guys with a grain of salt, and I think that Bloomberg's pretty straightforward about most things. But he couldn't resist this week when Howard Schultz's announcement came out, making the point that he deeply studied this and decided that by definition, a strong run from the middle was going to pull votes from the Democrats. So having said that, I'm not sure how he runs, and I'm not sure what it has to do with Biden, right? But we'll see. It'll be quite interesting. I guess his point is he would run as a Democrat.
Yeah. And by the way, and let's just do Howard Schultz for 3 lines.
Absolutely.
Makes a damn good cup of coffee. Thumbs up on Starbucks. Makes a shitty candidate.
Not only a shitty candidate, and I'm always intrigued by the new fresh blood and getting new ideas in here. But there's no doubt that he kind of tax Democrat and tax liberal. But if he doesn't understand that the way he made that announcement was a little bit of like, the last thing we need is somebody like him setting up the false equivalency of like both parties suck. Yeah. We know they both suck. We know they both suck. But there is a rot that is eternal on the right that I'm not really sure can ever be escaped from. And that's not me speaking politically. It's because of these stories of bad actors.
All right, so that brings us happily to my friend Douglas Rushkoff,
Well, why don't you have a bunch of different things going on, but I think it would be good if you would set it up a little because you went to the event and wrote a great piece that we'll include a link to that was his announcing the book, even though we've known he was talking this stuff for a while.
So here's what I love about Doug. And I've known we've been friends. I'm sorry, Douglas. When you call him Doug, he gets upset. We've been friends a long time. I love his writing. I love his podcast. He's deeply philosophical. He's a geek, but he's also an anthropologist and a theorist and very and very self-effacing. And he said in the book talk that he gave, one of the hypocrisies here is to be concerned about climate change and then going and giving essentially 30 book talks where you live on airplanes flying back and forth across the country. And he said, I may never do that again. But his essential setup is that he doesn't buy the idea that this is a man versus machine moment. Doesn't like the singularity, kind of as the next big nexus of drama in human existence, and thinks we need to kind of collectively get back to what he calls team human.
Right.
And essentially it's like, damn it, make the robots work for us. We're building them,
Right.
Make the AI work for us. We're building it. And, the only way it becomes our enemy or our competitor is if we build it that way.
Right. And I think also the idea of people power and bottom up instead of top down from a philosophical point of view is very important. He's not a he might have been called a socialist 5 years ago when it was a dirty word, but he's definitely putting the blame on these capitalist cycles that we're just caught in, and even blames the structure of our economy more than he does the individual actors in Silicon Valley. Although I find that they're the same as far as I'm concerned.
Well, but look, this is something you and I have talked about, a couple of times before. I mean, if you look at Google, in particular Google and Facebook's bad behavior, it comes down to advertising, right?
Yeah, it comes down to advertising and to the point that is not made explicitly by Rushkoff that I have read yet, but that is a point of mine, is that it even isn't in so much capitalism as the public markets sense of what a company is. The idea that you always have to be growing. You're growing revenues, growing profits, growing stock price so that the gambling can keep going. That's not a way to sort of, have a country mature and an internet marketplace mature. And so we're really caught in a rat race of revenue escalation that the big guys have to just keep getting bigger. So
perfect example of that, so you and I have talked a number of times about the relative upside of the podcasting business. Right. And I'm somewhat more on the sidelines about its revenue potential. That being said, Gimlet Media sold for $200 million yesterday.
Yeah. And Bill Simmons, the sports guy from The Ringer and Grantland, basically gave a transparency talk last week on a podcast where he admitted that their revenue, even though the journalists have been on the web forever, their revenues are escalating astronomically on podcasts, and so they're just throwing everything at it.
Yeah. So all right. So on the Rushkoff front, though, was there anything? So now it's your turn because I absorbed him in real time. But you read him, which is different.
Yeah.
Like, what did you take away?
Well, look, I actually think Douglas has been great because he's, unlike a lot of us, he was talking about digital in the mainstream media and has been part of a lot of PBS short docs and journalistic thread for a long, long time. That being said, his books have tended to be a little dry and not sort of super mass, popular in even how they're set up, much less if they've gotten the opportunity to get marketing dollars. But I like this one. It is a big, broad appeal. Team Human is it's the right idea. And it's funny that it reminds me a little bit of our other friend, Scott Heiferman, who's been on that rap for the longest time. This is the founder of many companies, but in particular Meetup. And, Meetup is something that was really about humans getting together in person, enhanced by technology. But the humans come first. The meeting in person comes first.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a good spirit behind all this. And it's hard to get specifics on it, but, I like his idea about AI better than others that I've heard, and it's just going to be about the execution.
You framed this particular story with a fairly dark tinge around it, and I guess if I can put you on the spot, I'll ask the question: do you think there's a version of the next 5 to 8 years of tech that isn't grim?
Well, and look, I set it up for dramatic effect because I really do believe it's the sort of the better angels in the corporate world and the startup world and among ourselves if we can take it on ourselves. So I'm not, it's very black and white to me. I find it hard to find the gray spots. It feels like there's bad days and there's good days, there's good news and there's bad news. And so where things evolve, I'm not sure, but I'm not without optimism. But I do feel like it's really rolling up to a ball being in the court of our current Congress. The idea that some changes and adjustments will be made is something that I'd like to see. I can't say necessarily what they'll be, but I do feel like half of this has to come from the mobilization of the public around excellent work by companies and individuals on the one hand, and where legislation and government goes. Because in a world with citizens united and in a world where net neutrality is in the hole, there's a lot of problems.
All right. Well, we've got just a couple of minutes left, and you promised us at the outset that we would touch the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So where should we go?
Well, let me just set it up a little, because the thing about the Super Bowl is, for years, and my old company Jupiter used to do really great forecasts and looks at it when a lot of digital was first showing up in the mainstream through big Super Bowl ads. And of course, a lot of the big Super Bowl ads want to create memes, want to go viral, want you to go to the web and do this and that. But that being said, instead of always being the cutting edge, the Super Bowl ads are kind of a throwback. They're about making you feel good. They're about brand enhancement, and politics and causes are we've seen data that we're going to show you that says equal and opposite things. So I guess let's hear from Steve, the consumer, for a second. Be guided by that. What is it that you like to see, don't like to see? Do you care if politics are brought in, or if you see something about global warming or Me Too in the middle of the Super Bowl?
So I'm not a huge consumer of Super Bowl, either football or advertising.
Right. You're not. You don't even sit down just to watch the commercials necessarily.
Some years I do, and some years I don't. I do mostly when I think that there are brands taking a stand on issues that matter.
That's interesting.
And look, I mean, you could say that the same thing happened at the Golden Globes and will likely happen at the Emmys. Everyone was so out there last year on issues in politics and, got near the edge of the universe. You can almost imagine that this is the year that everybody's pulling back.
I think that seems to be what's happening. And if, for those of you that follow sports or sports marketing, even in a business point of view, a year and a half ago, the NFL was looking in really bad shape. It looked like soccer and other things were making inroads. The young people were going everywhere. And for whatever reason, it's roared back with a pretty big year. And one of the things that's coming in from left field, and maybe we're going to build ourselves up to needing an episode on this, is gambling and the legalization and betting and the DraftKings and people's fantasy sports. And in a lot of ways, that's driven a lot of this. I don't do any of that stuff either, but I guess the coda here is that the Super Bowl is still kind of a Rorschach test of tons of things that are going on at once, but I'm not sure we're going to see another Apple 1984 commercial anytime soon.
Indeed. And with that, we are out of time. Enjoy the game. And we will be back again next week to look into the future.
Happy Super Bowl Sunday. We'll report after.
Party on.
All right. Bye-bye.